does fear really mean in the heavyweight division? It is not panic, and it is not doubt. It is the quiet understanding that some opponents bring a different kind of danger, one that cannot be solved by power alone. Riddick Bowe never questioned his own ability. At 6 feet 5 inches, with fast hands and a chin built for punishment, he entered the ring expecting violence and willing to give it back. In his prime, Bowe believed he could overwhelm almost anyone once the fight settled into rhythm. But experience teaches lessons strength cannot. As his career unfolded, Bowe learned that not every threat announced itself with speed or aggression. Some fighters changed how he prepared. They slowed his breathing, forced patience, and demanded respect before the first punch was ever thrown. When he spoke honestly, away from cameras and bravado, Bowe admitted something rare among champions. There were men he never took lightly. 6 names, 6 different kinds of danger. Number 6. George Foreman. By the time George Foreman entered the later chapter of his career, most heavyweights saw age before danger. Riddick Bowe did not. He understood that Foreman no longer relied on speed or volume, but on something far more unsettling: patience, weight, the certainty that one clean punch could erase everything that came before it. Foreman did not chase opponents. He stood in front of them, absorbing space inch by inch, forcing mistakes through presence alone. For a fighter like Bowe, who thrived on rhythm and controlled aggression, this was a different problem. There was no frantic movement to counter, no wild exchanges to dominate, just a man who waited, hands high, eyes calm, and feet planted like anchors. What unsettled Bowe most was the way Foreman removed urgency from the ring. Rounds could pass without drama, yet danger never faded. Every jab from Foreman carried weight. Every step forward shortened the margin for error. Bowe knew that one lapse in focus, one careless combination, could place him directly in the path of a punch that did not need speed to be devastating. Foreman's reputation added another layer. He was not just a puncher, he was a former champion who had already broken the rules of time once by returning to the top. That history mattered. It told Bowe that Foreman believed in inevitability. That belief alone changed how opponents behaved in front of him. Against Foreman, Bowe would not have been allowed to relax. He would have needed discipline for every second, restraint in moments where instinct demanded aggression, and humility to accept that power alone would not guarantee safety. Foreman forced champions to fight cautiously, to respect silence as much as sound. That is why George Foreman remained a name Bowe never dismissed. Not because of youth, or speed, or volume, but because danger does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it stands still, waits, and ends the night with a single decision. Number 5. Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis was not an unknown threat to Riddick Bowe. Their history went back years, long before championship belts and sold-out arenas. They had shared the same amateur stages, the same ambitions, and the same understanding of what elite heavyweight boxing required. That familiarity made Lewis more dangerous, not less. Lewis brought a style that disrupted Bowe's natural rhythm. Tall, disciplined, and methodical, he controlled distance with a long jab that arrived before opponents could settle. Where others invited exchanges, Lewis denied them. He did not rush chaos, he organized it. For a fighter like Bowe, who thrived when fights loosened and turned physical, this kind of control was unsettling. What weighed on Bowe was not raw power, but structure. Lewis boxed behind principles. He adjusted mid-fight, protected his advantages, and refused to give momentum freely. Every round felt planned. Every movement served a purpose. Bowe understood that against Lewis, impatience would be punished and aggression without setup would be neutralized. There was also the psychological layer. Lewis knew Bowe's tendencies, his comfort zones, and his vulnerabilities. That knowledge removed mystery and replaced it with precision. Bowe could not rely on surprise. He would have to earn every opening. Over time, the absence of a professional rematch became its own presence. It lingered as unfinished business, a reminder of a stylistic challenge never fully resolved. For Bowe, Lewis represented a version of danger that could not be intimidated or rushed. That is why Lennox Lewis stayed on the list. Not because of fear in the traditional sense, but because control can be just as threatening as violence. Against Lewis, Bowe knew the fight would be decided by patience, not bravado. Number 4. Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield never looked like the most dangerous man in the heavyweight division. He was smaller, lighter, and often gave away reach. But Riddick Bowe learned quickly that none of that mattered once the fight began. Holyfield brought a kind of pressure that did not fade with fatigue or punishment. It intensified. Their rivalry was not built on a single night. It was carved through repeated violence. Each encounter stripped something away, round by round, exchange by exchange. Holyfield refused to be discouraged. When hit hard, he came forward. When hurt, he answered. For Bowe, this created a unique kind of strain. There was no moment where Holyfield accepted defeat, even briefly. What unsettled Bowe most was Holyfield's inner rhythm. He did not fight emotionally, yet he fought with relentless conviction. He absorbed damage without surrendering position or purpose. Bowe could win rounds, land combinations, even dominate stretches of the fight, and still feel the pressure growing. Holyfield forced Bowe to give more than strength. He demanded endurance, discipline, and emotional control. The fight never slowed. The pace never softened. Every round felt like a test of resolve rather than technique. There was also the cost. Fighting Holyfield meant paying a physical and psychological price that lingered long after the final bell. Win or lose, nothing came easily. Bowe understood that no other opponent required such total commitment. That is why Holyfield remained one of the most difficult names on the list. Not because he could overpower Bowe, but because he could outlast him. Against Holyfield, the danger was not a sudden ending. It was the slow realization that the fight would demand everything, and then ask for more. Number 3. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson represented a kind of danger that arrived before the first punch was thrown. For Riddick Bowe, the threat was not only Tyson's power, but the speed at which everything could collapse. Fights against Tyson did not unfold gradually. They exploded. In his prime, Tyson compressed time. The opening seconds mattered more than entire later rounds. His movement, his head placement, the way he closed distance made it difficult for opponents to find their footing. Bowe understood that against Tyson, there was no warm-up period. The fight began at full intensity the moment the bell rang. What unsettled Bowe was the pressure to remain calm under immediate threat. Tyson forced reactions. He pulled fighters into exchanges before they had a chance to establish rhythm. For a heavyweight like Bowe, who relied on timing and combinations once a fight settled, that chaos was dangerous. One misread step, one delayed response, could put him in the line of a punch designed to end the night instantly. There was also the psychological weight Tyson carried into the ring. Opponents fought the reputation as much as the man. Bowe knew that resisting that pull required discipline, patience, and emotional control. Any lapse could invite disaster. Bowe often spoke about styles making fights, and Tyson embodied that truth. It was not about who was bigger or stronger. It was about who could impose their pace first. Against Tyson, control was fragile and time was limited. That is why Tyson remained a name Bowe never dismissed. Not because he feared being outworked, but because he respected how quickly everything could be taken away. Against Tyson, the danger was immediate, absolute, and unforgiving. Number 2. Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes presented a problem that could not be solved with aggression. By the time Riddick Bowe faced him, Holmes was no longer the dominant champion of his prime, but his most dangerous weapon remained intact: control. The jab that dictated distance, rhythm, and patience. For Bowe, Holmes represented a different kind of anxiety, not the fear of being overwhelmed, but the fear of being neutralized. Holmes did not rush exchanges or chase knockouts. He worked behind timing and placement, forcing opponents to reset again and again. Each round felt like a negotiation, not a brawl. What unsettled Bowe was the way Holmes exposed impatience. Missed shots were punished with clean counters. Forward momentum was slowed by constant contact. Holmes made opponents work without allowing them to dictate terms. For a fighter who preferred to impose physical dominance, that resistance required discipline few heavyweights enjoyed. There was also pride at stake. Holmes had long been considered one of the most technically complete heavyweights in history. Facing him meant risking something deeper than a loss. It meant risking being outboxed, made to look predictable, and stripped of initiative in front of the world. Bowe understood that beating Holmes required restraint. He had to choose moments carefully, resist frustration, and accept rounds that did not belong to him. Power alone was not enough. Strategy mattered. That is why Holmes ranked so high on the list. Not because of raw danger, but because he challenged something fundamental. Against Holmes, Bowe feared not the knockout, but the slow erosion of control, round by round. Number 1. Andrew Golota. Andrew Golota was not the most skilled opponent Riddick Bowe ever faced, but he was the most unpredictable. That unpredictability changed everything. Against Golota, boxing rules did not always apply, and that uncertainty created a different kind of danger, one rooted in loss of control rather than technique. Golota fought with a chaotic intensity that refused structure. He crossed lines, ignored boundaries, and turned exchanges into confrontations that felt personal. For Bowe, this created constant tension. There was no rhythm to settle into, no clear pattern to exploit. Every moment demanded alertness, not just strategy. What unsettled Bowe most was the way Golota pulled him out of his discipline. The fouls, the pressure, the emotional volatility turned the ring into something unstable. Bowe could feel the fight slipping away from technique and into reaction. That shift was dangerous, not only for winning, but for maintaining composure. The two bouts between them became infamous, not for clean competition, but for chaos. Crowds reacted, corners panicked, and control evaporated. In those moments, Bowe was not just fighting Golota. He was fighting the environment, the emotions, and the breakdown of order itself. Golota forced Bowe to confront a truth about fear. It is not always about losing to a better boxer. Sometimes it is about losing command of the fight, of yourself, and of the situation around you. That is why Andrew Golota stands at the top of the list. Not because he was the greatest heavyweight Bowe faced, but because he represented the most dangerous scenario. When control disappears, anything can happen. Riddick Bowe's career is often remembered through belts, victories, and missed opportunities, but these 6 names reveal a deeper truth. Each opponent represented a different kind of danger, not always tied to power or youth, but to control, patience, pressure, and unpredictability. Together, they formed a map of what truly threatens a heavyweight champion. Bowe did not fear pain. He had endured it too many times for that. What he respected was the possibility of losing command of a fight. Some men tested discipline, some tested patience, others tested emotional control. Against each of them, strength alone was never enough. In the heavyweight division, confidence is expected, even demanded. Admitting fear is often mistaken for weakness. But in reality, fear can be intelligence in its purest form. It sharpens preparation. It slows reckless instincts. It reminds a fighter that survival depends on awareness as much as courage. Riddick Bowe understood this, even when he did not always live by it. He knew that the most dangerous opponents were not always the ones who hit the hardest, but the ones who forced him to think, hesitate, and adapt. These 6 fighters did exactly that. They made him respect the limits of power and the cost of losing control. And in that respect, they shaped the legacy of a heavyweight who learned, sometimes painfully, what real danger looks like inside the ring.